Hello, and welcome to The Hump with Katie Thiroux. I'm your host, Katie Thiroux, and I'm bringing you interviews with some incredible artists, finding out why are they so amazing, how did it all happen, and what can we learn from their journey. Before we get started today, I'd like to thank our sponsors. And first up, we have Kolstein's. Kolstein's is my most absolutely favorite string shop to visit in the entire world. They're based in Long Island, New York, and anytime I'm in New York City, I make a special trip out to Kolstein's to see what new things they've got going on. They do everything from instrument repair to building their own instruments. They make beautiful double basses, they make their own strings and rosin. And hey, if you're ever in the area, make a special trip yourself. I think of it as the Disneyland of basses. It's so much fun. Go to Kolstein.com and use the promo code Katie10 to get 10% off your entire online purchase. That's Kolstein.com. Next up, we have Jams World. You all know how much I love Jams World. Of course, I'm sporting a Jams World right now. It's a family-owned and operated clothing company in Honolulu, Hawaii since 1964. Their clothing is so cool and so comfortable because it's made from 100% spun-crushed rayon, and it's real art screen printed onto the fabric. I absolutely love it. I feel like I'm wearing something made just for me. If you go to jamsworld.com and use the promo code JAZZ15, you'll get 15% off your entire online purchase. That's jamsworld.com. I'd like to remind you that I'm bringing you brand new episodes of The Hump every Wednesday, every Hump Day. Download and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and follow us on Instagram at The Hump with Katie. You don't want to miss a beat of what's going on over here. Okay, I am so excited to bring you our guest today, Kaveh Rastegar. I really don't know where to begin because he's not just a bass player, he's truly multi-talented. He's a bassist, he's a guitarist, he's a producer, he's a composer. He wrote a hit song for Bruno Mars. He's played with Ringo Starr, Bruce Springsteen, Sia, Sting, of course, Kneebody. I call him the everywhere man because this guy is really everywhere. We talk a lot about his humble beginnings and a lot about what it really means to be a good person and how that affects your musicianship. So without further ado, here is Kaveh Rastegar.
You can hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. And can you see me?
I can see you.
All right. Look at that.
It's like the beginning of a magic trick.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much. We're not live right now, but thanks so much for joining us on The Hump. I'm so excited to finally get to speak with you in person.
Yeah, me too. I've been such a fan since I think I heard you play and do something it was on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, but really nice to meet you.
Well, we're not going to talk about me today, Kaveh. It's all about you.
Come on. Okay.
Right. I mean, I've got some questions I definitely want to ask you specifically just as a fan, but I mean, describing you as a bassist doesn't really quite cut it. I mean, you play bass, you play guitar, you sing, you produce, you write music. When did you leave? When did all that happen? When did you go from being a bass player to a multi-talented superhuman?
Oh God. I don't know. Like I always, you know, I don't know. Like I remember I had some mentors early on that would talk about, there's a drummer in particular. I grew up in Denver. Have we started? Are we starting?
Yeah, we're started.
Okay. All right. Because I'm not going to repeat this. No,
good, thank you. You're like me. I hate repeating myself.
Really? Yeah. No, I'm kidding. No. Okay. I grew up in Denver, and there was a mentor out there. I remember him specifically saying, his name is Mark Fuller, who is a great drummer, but he's a real polymath, like a true polymath. We're just really good at a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And I remember he made he's probably maybe like 15 years older than I am, and he was my stepfather in Denver. Was a real and is a real, you know, just really great artist and a great musician. He's a guitar player and a composer. And this guy, Mark, was his drummer at the time. And I remember Mark saying, like, I don't consider myself a drummer. I consider myself a musician. Mm-hmm. You know, you've probably had that being told to you, and a lot of bassists, you know, like I just really took that to heart. Like I always really thought um, about that. And, but then, you know, but sometimes that kind of thinking got in the way of my, like, just focus on bass playing, like mechanics here and there, like,
Yeah.
you know, for the years, you know, it's like, no, I'm just a musician. I'm not gonna, you know, focus on whatever I was, you know, probably should have been focusing on. But that was always really important to me. It's just like, being, um, you know, being, I guess, well-rounded in that way. And I always wrote, you know, wrote songs, and or whatever you would call it. Like, you know, just there was always a creative aspect to my music making from I guess the first day, where it was like it was just a thing. You know, I started on the electric bass and picking it up and just kind of discovering things and making making things like riffs or songs or, you know, little patterns or and then, you know, piecing little chunks together and having like a piece that I had kind of made. And that was, and then I think through that developed some, like, you know, interesting or unique to me, you know, kind of techniques that, and I think that always, that worked too with, I always liked to draw, and, you know, that idea of, you know, you have an empty piece of paper, and at the end of the day, or at the end of a couple of days, you have this thing that didn't exist before.
Yeah, there's tons of layers to it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was something that was always felt good. And then especially early on, I remember having that feeling of like, you know, there's, I mean, I guess at every stage of the game, the music game, or whatever you want to call it, business, or, there's always, like, you know, there's elements of competition, there's elements of, like, you know, and you're measuring yourself up against other bass players and measuring yourself up against other musicians. And one of the things, like, one of the coping mechanisms for me was always like, you know, no matter what, I kind of have these things I make that, you know, I could come back to, like, I will always hire me, you know?
Yeah. That's important too, to kind of like respect your own artwork and to have your own artistic ego, which I think is a good thing. Not like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I do, you know, and like kind of just being your own advocate. And because really, like, you know, if you can't count on anyone else to be, because, you know, you've got to have that thing that just kind of gets you going. And you know, music making is such a like a lifelong path, and it's such a journey of the self, you know. And it's so, it does, you know, it really doesn't matter, you know, approval doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, it is important to work with other people, but yeah, there's, like, fundamentally, like, there should be that thing that just kind of, like, it doesn't matter to anyone.
Exactly.
You know?
That self-referral coming back to you. Yeah. And it's funny, like, when people get pulled in so many different directions, not that you're pulled in different directions, you're really good at a bunch of different things, but sometimes it's out of desperation. Because I remember a really great musician, saying, like, yeah, you know, you play bass, but you better do some copy work and things like that. And I'm like, I don't want to do copy work. You know, just in case something happens. I'm like, there's no just in case. But I did find, like, there's other things that I like to do within music that kind of like fill that void if something's not happening. But I feel like you, like, being a producer and a, like, composer and a music director, like, those haven't pulled you in directions that make your music suffer.
Oh, thanks for saying that. You know, and you're kind of speaking to the plan B, kind of the plan B that people will kind of throw at you, that it's a well-meaning gesture, you know. And but but I agree. It's a real, I think that if you, at least for me, like if like you know, there's times where there've been, you know, there have been some things. I don't know. I just never. I really never really had a plan B, and I don't know. I don't really know very many people that did. You know, there were some people that really had a lot of pressure from family to, you know, like, okay, you can pursue music if you check this box, box. But aside from that, like you know, I mean, actually, I mean, there are some other people that did that, and there are some people that, but I don't know. Yeah, for me, I really never did. I never had that kind of thing, and it was so funny. This is something that I do talk about a lot when I talk about, you know, my story, and it's the idea of blinders. Like I just had, and I think I continue to have like these blinders that are like, you know, just kind of focused on the next thing, and like, you know, early on for me, it was like, you know, oh my God, I can learn this bass line by Simon Gallup from The Cure. And like, holy shit, I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to do this yesterday, and I figured it out myself. And then I'm on top of the world. And then like, there's like this incremental, and it was never, I remember, or, you know, and then up to, I get to play with this drummer at this cafe for, you know, and get free coffee.
Yeah.
And, you know, get $9 at the end. Are you kidding me? Like, you know, like that kind of sense of just like, you know, it's like Steve Martin, you know, it's like, it's kind of like, bewildered, you know, but also like, enthusiastic, kind of, psyched for the opportunity kind of outlook, like as much as possible. Like I really, that's really served me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love Steve Martin's book, Born Standing Up. It's a short read. It's not that long, but yeah, he talks a lot about the beginning, and again, anyone in any art form can relate to that, having that excitement. And musicians that I really love and respect, like you and John Clayton, they've really taught me, and I take this to heart. It's like, it doesn't matter what gig you're playing. Like you said, like you were playing at a cafe with some killing drummer. You could be there one night and then at Madison Square Garden the next night. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, it really is.
Because you have to not just respect the music you're playing, but the audience, the people that are there, that they took time out of their day to come and support you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, yeah, and it's kind of all about getting to that feeling, you know, like that feeling of like making something, you know, and just kind of playing a role. And yeah, there's some, I was thinking about this the other day too. I don't know if you have any parallels with an activity. I was reading a little bit about your bio, like about you starting really early with music. It seems like for me, I music was all around. It was everywhere, in the house, and my parents just listened to it voraciously. They're both not musicians, but they had split up early, but I kind of jumped back and forth between both houses, and I got into like playing music in school band in fifth grade, like as a 9-year-old, but I really got into skateboarding, you know, around like 10 or 11, and that kind of wave of like, you know, that punk rock.
That was your era.
That was my era. Yeah, that was really like, you know, 1987, you know, it was like a really big time where skateboarding, I think in the history of it, like it really came back. Like it was really big in the mid to late 70s. And I think it like the hardcore people just kind of kept it, but they like it was just a fad through the, you know, and then it just really just came roaring back around 86, 87. And I was like all about it, you know? And there was something about that, you know, where it's like you have the skateboard, there's a culture associated with it. There's the there's the gear, there's a magazine that you can kind of like read about heroes and see like what they do, and you're emulating them out on the streets, and you're with your friends, and you're just out for the whole day, and you're like falling down, and there's a camaraderie kind of a thing, and you're getting better, you know, and you're making do with the gear that you have, you know, like you've got to, you know, it's like nobody has any money, and you're just kind of like, you're skating, you know, and I remember when I got into playing music of my own accord and playing bass. Bass was definitely a thing where it's just like, I want to play this thing. There was a real parallel for me with skateboarding, where it's just that kind of like, this is something that I'm doing. This is something that I'm, you know, kind of taking ownership of. And there's all of those elements of you know, like the, you know, all of those things, like, you know, the society, the heroes, the mentors, the, you know, the magazine, the gear, all that stuff that is pretty neat, you know, that I remember really taking to, and taking those parallels, like, that's kind of like this, you know. So really, I enjoyed that too, you know, getting into it.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like, it's not a sport. It's not a team sport, but like you're saying, it's like, oh, my friends are doing this, we're getting better together. Or there's that accountability as well. It's like, you guys are going to jam tomorrow, and we said we're going to learn this song, and hey, the guitarist didn't learn it. So it's kind of like, you're kind of learning really life lessons at that point.
Yeah. And people are getting better, and you're kind of like lagging behind, and then the other people kind of raise you, and you raise other people up, which is very much the music community. Like, it's, you know, that was another a thing with me, like a real key part of my story was, you know, the people that I was around that led to opportunities, and we created our own opportunities really early on. I was self-taught, and you know, self-taught is a weird word, because you pick up anything from anyone, and that's not entirely true. Like, I remember, you know, someone showing me, you know, how to play like a fingering for a major scale, you know, just little things like that. But I didn't really have lessons until way later, and but my teachers were, you know, some of the older kids in the high school I went to, and then when they moved away, it was like my entire community disappeared, my entire music making community, because they were 2 grades older than me, and then they went to college, and it was like, oh shit, you know, you know, where's my scene, you know, like to me, like it was such an honor to get to play with this guy Mike Prasad. Like, oh my god, like he was, you know, he'd teach me like Cream bass lines, Jack Bruce or Stevie Ray Vaughan. We play over blues and all that stuff, and skip lunch and just go to the band room and just get to play with Mike. And then Mike went off to college, and so did this other kid, and it's like, what do I do? You know? And I think that's, for musicians, that's a real like turning point, where it's like, it's like a flower or whatever. It can, you know, that's like where you just kind of stop watering, and then it's like, you gotta, but for me, it was the summer after that, or it was actually, it was a summer, it was like a couple months after they went to school. I stumbled onto this thing. I went with some friends when I was 15 to like a battle of the bands thing, like a local in Denver. And it was one afternoon. I just went with some friends, and we went to a thing where there was all these local bands playing. And there was there were all these bands that were like, you know, people, you know, that were in their probably 20s, late 20s, but then to us, they seemed like ancient, you know. And they sounded all right or whatever. But then there's this one band, they went up on, you know, it was on this like grassy hill where the concert was, like right by the Platte River in downtown Denver. And this one band comes out, and they're all like kind of my age, like maybe a year or 2 older, but like right around the same age. Like, kind of freaky looking dudes, like no shirts on and long hair, and it was the 90s, so goatees, and and just really, and they seemed funny, they seemed like funny people, like,
Yeah.
and they had such a like a chemistry together, and they were doing a line check, like checking the bass, checking the drums, checking the guitar, and it was like, shit, they're good, and then they played, and it was like, whoa, these guys are great. And I remember a week later going to see Primus, um, at the Gothic Theater in Denver, and I was standing in line, and that band was called the Psychedelic Zombies, and and I was standing in line out front of the Gothic Theater, and I saw this kid. He had a T-shirt on that said Psychedelic Zombies, and I was like, that they're a good band, like I said it to this guy, and he's like, yeah, I know, the guitar player is my brother. I was like, oh shit, and then I noticed that the singer from the band was in the audience of the show, and I ran up to him, and I was like, and at that point I couldn't drive, I ran up to him, I was like, hey man, like, you guys are good, I'm a bass player, like, and just kind of sold my bill of goods. And I remember he wrote down his number to me, like, he was like, here's my number. He wrote it because I'm looking for a guitar player, I remember I said, and then he's like, here's my number. And then that friendship with those people just became my scene. And that guitar player, Nate's brother in that line, his name is Josh Lopez, and he and I, there's a song by Kai that's coming out this week that we wrote on. We co-wrote a song by Bruno Mars, 10 years ago now, but Josh is a dear friend. His father, Joe Lopez, when I finally started studying double bass when I was 19, his dad, Joe, is a great bass player in Denver, and was just like, you need a bass. Here's a bass. Just pay me for it whenever you want, like whenever you can. Like, he had like 3 because he inherited one from a gig that he got. And that was my bass, and it's downstairs. You know what I mean? Like, for me, that was like finding my tribe was key. And those guys are such a good band in Denver, and I was in all the offshoot bands of theirs. And they were such a great band, like No Doubt, when they hadn't broke yet, they would come and they would open for the Zombies, or the Zombies would open for Fishbone. I don't know if you know them, but Fishbone, they were my heroes. And at 16, I got to like tech for a little, like, be a bass tech for my friend Kevin for a run of shows through Colorado and Wyoming, and that was like an early, it's like 15, 16, just kind of playing at those venues. And my first gig was at a club where it was like kids were packed into their room, and it was like, we can do this. Like, this is a possibility. We're doing it. Yeah. And so I was really lucky to have that, and to have stumbled into that world, and to have those friends, that all of those people that were just so good and fun and funny, and crazy adventures we had, like, just, and to have those enduring friendships, like, all of those guys I'm still very close friends with, and thankfully so.
Well, you bring up 2 really great points. One, like you said, we can do this because we're doing it. And there's a great writer I like, Mark Nepo, and he's always like, people are saying, well, I want to be a poet, I want to be a dancer. It's like, well, just write poetry, just dance, just you just do it. It's not like that. If you want to do it, you just do it, and you can do a million things.
I love that.
And then also, because it takes the pressure off of like, okay, I have to do this or else, but like having that mindset, and like you said, having blinders on, it's like, well, I'm doing it right now,
Yeah.
And then also the other thing you brought up, which really makes a lot of sense for me too. It's like when you were in high school and those seniors went off and graduated, we've all had that moment in our musical careers too, where it's like, man, this person, they had to leave the gig and we were playing together for a long time. What am I going to do? And it becomes like this is my problem now. But then you look at it on the other end, you're just like, I have so many possibilities and I'm so happy for that person. They're doing something else and taking that situation, which can kind of be like, where do I go from here? And then look at all the wonderful positive things that happened.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're all pretty bound to each other too. Like we're all pretty, like everyone's decision kind of influences a lot of other people's decisions too. I was, so early in our 20s, my friends and we started this band called Kneebody,
Mm-hmm.
and we had all been good friends for years before that. In fact, the trumpet player Shane and we met each other when I was 18. He was 18 back in Denver. And, that band definitely had that thing. That friendship really had that kind of strong power to my life, that friendship with Shane, because we met each other when I was 18 through, it all comes back to that afternoon in
Mm-hmm.
Denver, like one of the trumpet players that ended up playing with the Zombies, like the Zombies became they were like a horn band, like a Tower of Power band, like really like beautifully arranged and like funky and like just great harmony and energy. And they had a 5-piece horn section, great. It was that kind of a band. Mm-hmm. And the horn players were a little older, like they had gone to college, okay. Like that was the thing, yeah. Like they had gone to school and they were the ones that were throwing around, major 7 sharp, whatever, like all the jazz chord terminology, like they were the ones that were, and so we would kind of like, what does that mean, and learn about, those kind of things. They were kind of like mentors too. And so anyway, one of their trumpet players and I became really good friends. We started playing together a lot, and that's how I met Shane, is through him, this guy Derek Bannock, and Shane and I started this band. When I was 18, I had a lot of opportunities at that point in Denver and in Boulder, because I was playing all these gigs all over town, and I had a band that I put together, and I was writing music for, and it was this band, and it was like Shane and I and this great drummer, this guy Mark Rains, who's a lot, he was maybe 12 or 13 years older than us, just killing drummer, and this other great piano player, who's an older jazz piano player, this guy Jeff Cleveland, and this other saxophone player, and we had this. It was a quintet, and it was like, and it was like a real like precursor to our band Kneebody. It was like this real DIY thing, like, and at that point I was not musically literate. I would sing, sing melodies, and I would record melodies or record different things onto a cassette tape. I used to carry around a cassette deck everywhere I went, and sing into it and record ideas. And I had just like stacks of tapes of ideas and like little things on the bass, and then those made their way into our band, and we would play. I remember we opened for the Roots, and we opened for Medeski, Martin and Wood, and the Charlie Hunter Trio, and would play gigs all around Denver and Boulder. And then Shane, he went to Eastman. He was going to college at that time. I wasn't going to college, and he went to Eastman, and I'd never heard of Eastman. Mm-hmm. He went there, and he's like, I hear this, like, he transferred from CU. He was like, I hear there's a really great program there. Ralph Alessi is there, and Mike Kane are there, and that's the place to be, and he went, and for me, it was that thing. It was like a real void in my, musical life. Was just like, oh shit, what do I do? And that's when I decided to go to college, and went to the state school because I could afford it. And I entered because I didn't play double bass. I entered. They didn't accept electric bass as a real instrument, so I was in the Glee club, Okay. So a singer in the Glee Club,
Nice.
and I loved it. And I was like singing bass, and I mean, it was an amazing experience. I was up in Greeley in northern Colorado, and I was just practicing bass all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a bow. I started with French bow, then I switched to German, and I just started, devouring. I quit all the bands I was in Denver, and I was in this reggae band, and we had just played at Red Rocks, like the big venue in Colorado, and that was my last gig with that reggae band. I was like, I'm going to go to school. Like I had taken a couple of years off after high school, and it was just, and then from there, I transferred to Eastman. I just practiced a ton and took lessons with this guy, Ken Harper, who was the associate principal bassist with the Colorado Symphony, and Jim Vaughn at UNC, and, got it together enough to get that audition and kind of get through. And I know that Shane had a lot to do with me kind of slipping in under the cracks. And then I went to Rochester for a couple of years. And then that was like a real fun experience because I was just there for 2 years, but it was kind of like that, like Hogwarts kind of a thing where it's like, there's just these freaks, especially when I was there. It was like, it was a small program. I think there's 30 something people in the jazz department. So it's like, you knew everyone so well. Like there was like, like 4 or 5 bands, and you just knew everyone they're playing, but just who they were so well. And that was really neat. It was just like, and to this day, I'm in touch with most of them, and they're all such freaks and fun people. And then the other cool thing about that school was all of the classical stuff, like playing the orchestra there and taking lessons with J.V. Vandermark and then Jeff Campbell. But all of the weird ensembles you could get into, playing the percussion ensemble or playing in people's recitals, getting to play like, Berg and Schoenberg and Stravinsky and getting to play, Mahler's Ninth Symphony and getting to play Prokofiev and then, getting to, McCoy Tyner came and getting to play in the orchestra behind him, or all that amazing stuff. And then just being around really freakishly talented musicians, like bass players there were just so like, who am I in this? And that was really like a thing where it's just like, well, I better like, remember like,
well, it lifts you up.
It does. It really does. Yeah.
That's funny. Like when I went to Berklee and I played in the steel pan ensemble.
Yeah.
I played bass steel pans. It was great. It's just fun. Like you're saying, it's like I'm doing this stuff I'd never do before. But it seems like for you getting, musical education, not only did it help you an immense amount, but was it something like just innate in you where it's like, okay, if I want to do this, I need to learn that language a little bit more?
Yeah. And it's good that you said, I like that you say language too. It's like, it is such a language. It's, somebody said this, they were talking about Barack Obama, few years ago. They were analyzing his speech to his speech patterns when he was speaking to different sets of people. And he's such a master of language and he's such a master communicator, and he would change his vocabulary depending on who he was talking to. And some people who might be his critics or whatever might say that, oh, he's not real or he's not, genuine. But it's like, like if he's speaking in to an African-American audience in a Baptist church somewhere, he's going to use different words, different inflections, or if he's speaking to Congress or if he's addressing the UN, And then this woman said that, who really got me. She said that language is currency, and it's literally like, it's money. Like, if you have enough money to go and take that trip to wherever, you got to pay the money, you go somewhere, and it's, so, I think in music and in a lot of other spheres of life, like knowledge isn't always valued, it's not always like, championed, or or it's like there's this always this like this balance between like elitism or just naivete,
Yeah.
and I just always, I like to talk to, I'm a father, and I like to talk to my kids about, just kind of just learn everything, like learn as much as you
Yeah.
can. And you can go to different settings and use different language, or use, because all you want to do is you want to have that currency to be able to express it. And that was really, you know, my musical education, hopefully, reflects that, is about, it's ever continuing.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're just like, always working on another aspect, and always like, hopefully always somewhat fascinated, and
Yeah.
able to plug it in certain, but if I'm dealing with a certain musical situation with people who don't talk about those symphonies, or don't talk about like DRI and the Bad Brains and Black Flag, or don't talk about Milt Hinton, or don't
Yeah.
talk whatever, it's like, just know who you're talking to, like know which words to use.
That's so
So
important because it's, again, like language, and music is a language. It's how do you relate to people, because you want to. And those, I agree too, words, language is currency, but those relationships are too. Not monetarily, but they can, I mean, sometimes they are, but they can lead to
yeah,
many different things.
they can.
Um,
Yeah.
and you already had half the language. I mean, you had everything orally down, it seemed. So you already speak in the language, but just getting that other half.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a real like the time that I spent in college was all about catch up, but it was also, and I talk to younger musicians about that too. Like, when you go to college, if you're going to study music in college, like when you're there, you have so much thrown at you,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like the years spent after that are the years that you're going to be spending digesting that everything
Yes.
that's thrown at you. It's like, I don't think you can possibly, um, digest a fraction of really what's thrown at you. And it's like, all you're doing, all you're just kind of, you're getting like this, hopefully you're getting this like simulation of a musical life, where it's like you just have tons of stuff thrown at you, and you got to just jump into it, da, da, da. But in your own practice down the road, you're integrating it somehow, and you're implementing it, and coming to terms with it, finally addressing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the fun part. Well, how do you, I mean, this could be, I mean, we could talk for hours, but how do you go from, you're in Colorado kicking ass, doing your thing, and then you go to Rochester. But like today, when I'm talking to Kaveh today, it's like you've had this amazing career getting to spend time with did you ever dream that you'd be playing with Ringo Starr, Sting, and then doing other things? You like being a music director, John Legend, Sia, recording, producing, having any of that happen, or was it just like we were talking about, like you were just doing it?
It was, there's a little bit of that thing where it was like, I was, I think that people should, like, what I wish for my kids and all of my friends and people who, everyone, like, I just wish for like those, and I've talked about this before, like, small victories,
Hmm.
like just a small victory where it's like, you have that thing where you want to learn this thing, and you are able to learn it, and then that will lead to another victory, will lead to another victory. And because if you think of the opposite, if you have something that just stands in the way, that it's like, you're this, you're not worth
Hmm.
it, not, or whatever the circumstances may be, that just don't even lead to that first small victory, or you just look at the big, the playing with, the big artists as
Yeah.
like, that's it,
Hmm.
and you don't even think about all that other stuff, the things that lead to the possibilities, then you might not have any of those small victories,
Yeah.
like, which will lead to amazing places. Um, so I really believe in that, and I think, and that goes for the times that we're in today. Like, it's just such a crazy time, and everyone's going through so much. Everyone, you know,
Mm-hmm.
everyone is affected by this pandemic and is affected by climate change and is affected by, you know, growing fascism in this country, and, you know, and I think that, you know, like I still need those victories, like those small, like, you know, like just things to kind of pick you up and put you onto the next path, you know. And so that's really important to me. And another thing is just seeing like the possibilities modeled for you, like seeing like that's somebody who's doing something, you know, like like I don't know where I would be if I had not been around people like Ron Miles, who's a, you know, a real mentor of most of us Denver musicians, you know, like just a phenomenal, just beyond talent, is just a like oracle, you know, and the way that he lives his life with such grace and dedication and artistry, you know, just getting to be around him. Or another one was Lonnie Marshall, a great bass player who had a band called Weapon of Choice that you guys got to check out. He was my favorite bass player because I met him when I was 16 through all these guys. And his brother, Arik, got the gig with the Red Hot Chili Peppers when we were in high school. And it was like, Lonnie's brother's in the Chili Peppers. What the hell? You know, like just getting to see that was huge. So it was kind of like, you know, not that it's like all those names that you mentioned, I just kind of like took for granted, or, you know, like I really want to get to play with as many people I just love and admire as possible. But getting to see that it's possible, it's a huge help. Cause, I remember, you know, like playing on, I don't know if you ever did this, like I played on, you know, like 1 year played on the auditions of people who came to Eastman, and or to audition to come in, and there's this guy, a saxophone player, he's so good, his name is David Crowell, and I think now he's done a lot of music, or I think he's in the Philip Glass ensemble now, like, but he's from Alaska, and this was like before the internet was really a thing, you know. He's from Alaska, and he came to, you know, and we played through this chart, you know, like all these, you know, his 3 songs were just like up tempo, Charlie Parker, like bebop tunes. And he's just ripping, you know, and with the swagger and with the vibe. And I remember the head of the department just being like, how can you do this? Like, where are you from? Like, you're from, you know, like this small town in Alaska. You've got that, like, you know, so I don't really know what his story was, but like, you know, it's just crazy. Like what kind of leads, what's there to kind of model to help lead you to places, you know? So,
yeah. And that's what I think, like you're saying, it's like, I'm seeing someone else do it, so I can do it. And that's actually, I think, one of the, say what you will about social media, but I think that's one of the cool things where I might see someone, you know, had a really cool opportunity, and instead of being like, you know, thinking, oh, I should have gotten that or whatever, I'm just like, wow, that means that's awesome. And that means there's opportunity for me or for my friend or something, like, because they were able to do that. Instead of like, I know a lot of my friends can, you know, just get real dark, you know, when they see someone else succeed, but their success is, you know, all of our success.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I also I see what they mean when you're on the other side of that. You're just like, oh man, you know. But I do agree that like quantitatively, like it all kind of, you know, it's like we see that with the pandemic. Like we see how the opposite is, you know, is true. It's just like, you know, without it's like it is an all-in kind of proposition when even like the top level is affected so heavily as it is now, everyone suffers. You know, so the opposite, like you're saying, is totally true. It's like when people succeed, like it does eventually indirectly, you know, or it can really bring everybody up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're such a humble person, Kaveh. So I hope I can get these answers out of you. But so you finally, you know, make your way to LA. But was there a moment when you were finally like, I've made it, or you know, like this is awesome, or like I'm here type of a thing?
Oh my God. Well, for me, it was, and this is so kind of silly to say, and it's like, but I really did feel like I made it getting to play with Mike Prasad in the band room.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, it was like, and it was really that kind of, you know, all of those little, you know, those steps along the way. I truly felt like that. And there have been times where it's like I really got my ass handed to me through like a little bit of hubris with it all, like, but I really there. I definitely had a lot of that Forrest Gump kind of naivete, you know. It's like I made it, you know.
Yeah.
One of my, on a side note, if I can like tell one of my favorite LA stories, like starting out stories. So I remember moving here, and I moved here with knowing lots of people because my dad had moved here, but all of my Denver scene had moved here, maybe 30 or 40 musicians, and they were all doing stuff like and playing in some of the big bands. Like Macy Gray was just breaking, and a lot of that band were friends of mine, and same with, you know, like a lot of bigger touring bands. So in that, you know, I could see, you know, how I kind of fit into the sphere, but you know, just hustling. And I remember our friend Nicole, she was working for a management company. They were moving offices, and they were moving from Santa Monica. There's two partners, and one of them was moving to New York, and the other one was moving out of the office to his home in Marina Del Rey. And it was like, Nicole was like, "You guys need money. Like, you know, do you want to help move the office?" You know? And I was like, "Yeah, tell me when to show up. You know, I'm there. Like, pick up a U-Haul truck on Lincoln and drive up to Third Street Promenade and park it." And it was me and Scott Seaver, who plays drums with Tenacious D now, and he and I were in our first band back in Denver when we were 15. But Scott and I, you know, it's like, make $50, you know, like, you know, yeah, of course. And, you know, picked up the truck, drove down there, and just did the thing, like up and down the steps, like looking out filing cabinets. And, you know, one of the filing cabinets I actually own, it's down in the garage still, like with like, you know, and, you know, and they managed that company. They managed like cool artists, you know, like Dr. John, and like maybe Kent Mo, maybe D-Light was, you know, in there. And it was like, oh, cool. You know, like, this is how I'm going to break in, you know, like, you know, and I remember just like, you know, backbreaking work, like, you know, just moving and carrying all this shit, and loaded the truck, drove it down, and then we got another errand. Like, they tagged on another errand, and it's like, you know, you had to bargain. You know, it'd be like, well, it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be another $50. You know, and just no problem. Okay, cool. So I felt good. Like I'm getting my friend an extra, you know, we're making $100 today. Are you kidding me? You know, and we drove, and I remember like drove down to Marina Del Rey, moved the last box into this guy, I think his name was Danny's house, put it, you want it here? Okay, yeah, okay, cool. You know, put it there, walked out, you know, and he's like, 2 clean $100 bills, and shook hands, and I was like, and then he's like, thank you so much. And I was like, oh yeah. And I was like, here's my chance. I go, you know, so, you know, I just want to mention, you know, I'm a bass player, you know. I said, oh yeah. I said, yeah. I go, yeah, I, you know, play electric, but I also play upright. I bow, you know, you know, like, you know, like, oh really? You know, hey, give me your number, you know. Oh yeah, cool, you know, and gave him my number. Blah, blah. His name was Danny something. And I, you know, walked back to the truck, gave Scott $100. Scott, you know, drove it back to Lincoln and took it. And then like 2 months later, I was in my apartment, and the phone rang. And I pick up the phone, and hello, and it's this woman. She goes, "Hello, is you know, Kaveh there? You know, oh yeah, this is he. Oh yes, you know, hi, you know, my name is someone I can't say her name, but blah blah." She's like, "My name is so and so." She goes, "I'm a songwriter." Oh, yeah, okay, cool. She's like, "Yeah, I'm a songwriter. I've written with, you know." She goes like, "I've written with like the Jacksons, with freaking, you know, it was the Jacksons, you know, and then Bette Midler. Oh, cool. You know, like just list this huge list of all these people she's worked with, written with, da da da." It's like, "Oh, great." She goes, "I got your number from Danny." Like, "Oh, yeah." And she goes, "I'm getting evicted. I need help moving."
Oh my gosh. Wow. What a humbling experience.
And I said, "Yeah, sure. Oh,
Yeah.
tell me when to show up."
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love those moments when they're just totally unexpected.
Yeah. But no, I don't know. It's been a crazy journey, and it definitely continues to be. That was definitely a thing too. I remember I learned when I moved here, like you start to get to meet your idols and your heroes and work with them or play with them, or just be around them. And I remember like making this mistake early on, like just saying to a drummer I grew up listening to, "Man, I've been listening to you since I was like 11 years old." Well, and he's just like, "Dude, don't make me feel so old," you know, like, and just realizing that all of these people that you're working with at every level, at the, like the top level, they're still doing that hustle. They're still thinking about this project, the best way to communicate their art, the best way to put it out there, the best way to present it, the best way to, you know, what other artists are doing, you know, all that stuff. It just continues, you know, it's always like people are always doing that stuff.
Yeah, I think that some people of the general public may not realize, like those people we're talking about that we idolize. You might think like, oh, it's their whole team coming up with all these ideas, and usually that person, they're a genius, and it's them, and it's coming from them and the top down, and other people help them to make it happen. But it is cool when you realize your heroes, wow, they're serious badasses.
They're serious badasses, and they're hustling, you know, and they're hustling, and it's like, and kind of speaking to that, like when you made it kind of a thing, it's like you kind of realize that like people, there might be those moments where it's like, oh yeah, this feels like a real milestone, you know, whatever it is, it's a milestone. But you know, like it's just this ever, like you're always kind of propelling yourself into other realms and trying to, and in some ways just trying to stay afloat, you know, like trying to, you know, and reinvent what you do, or, you know, who you're working with, or it's ever changing, you know? Yeah.
You've been involved with so many other people's projects, and you were probably making your own music the whole time, but it wasn't until like kind of recently that you put out two really wonderful projects, like in the like 2018 and 19. I was just listening to Haunted This Way today.
Oh, thanks.
But why did you wait to put your own music out? And I was like, man, I had no idea Kaveh sang. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, I you know, I had I kind of, I put my first album out under my own name in 2018, and it's an album called Light of Love, and then the next year put out Haunted This Way, which that album, which was, you know, technically was my second album, was technically my first album that I had completed under my own name. I just hadn't really put it out yet. And, you know, for me, it was like, there was a lot of things that kind of got in the way of putting out music, my own music. And I think part of it was, I've always been I've always kind of jumped from sphere to sphere, and found ways to kind of add value to a situation and play a role. And I think that people can relate with this, that like people know you from certain settings. They don't, but they don't know the whole you, or at least you that you want them to know. Like so there would be people that would be like, oh yeah, he's the Kneebody guy.
Yeah.
Or he's the whatever. Like I used to play with a really well-known Italian singer. Like I did a lot of Italian records, and he's that guy. Or he's the guy from John Legend's band, or he's the guy. Or like he's the guy from De La Soul's project. Like whatever. Like, and I guess, well, for me, first off, making a record, I was around so many amazing musicians when I was in my 20s that were in their 20s too, that I felt there was a real period of second guessing that while I was like doing things and kind of like making music and touring and getting to be a part of records and contributing to Kneebody's music. By like Kneebody, everybody in the band would write. So like there, it'd be kind of like a Beatles thing where it's like there would be like a handful of McCartney and Lennon songs, some George Harrison songs, and then there would be like it's like there's that thing where like everybody in the band writes, and so I always felt like, okay, I'm contributing to each project, and then I would write with other people, and I got into the songwriting world like probably around 2008, where it was like started writing with and for other artists. But it's like, for me, being around like Shane Inslee when he put out his first record that I helped him make, or being around Nate Wood when he came out with his album when he was 23, Reliving. Like he was a Kneebody, but he was like making this record. Like I was just like, where does my thing fit in? Like where, or then Ben Wendell started his, like these are the guys in the band, where it's like, where's my voice? Like what is, and for me, there's a real period of second guessing, like a real like, what do I have to say? Like what, even though I felt like I really had, like I had a thing, and for me, it was like really liberating. I worked on the Haunted This Way songs, and it felt really great to kind of get to it. And I just had this thing where it's like, I wanted to make this record that was like inspired by, I was listening a lot to the Plastic Ono band.
Okay. That's amazing that you brought that up. Okay. Cause I was having flashbacks while I was listening. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just loving like there's that song Cold Turkey.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then there's the, whatever the, it was the, where he's like, do you remember? Like, where he's like, it's of November. I was listening a lot to that when I was kind of conceiving of the project. And anyway, it just felt really good to kind of dive into that and make that. But the Light of Love for me was like a really liberating project, where it was like, I'm going to pull it all together and try to really, use these facets of like that world where like I do go into studios a lot and either produce or work with producers and artists to make their songs. So it's like, I'm going to do that for myself. I'm going to come up with like cool tracks and things where it's like, I'm improvising with, there are two drummers. One of them is Scott Seaver, the guy in the truck, the moving truck. One of them is Scott, and then the other one is Chris Dave. And we made these like, and improvised, like just jamming, and it's like, this feels really good, and it just felt so liberating. And then I would go to the hard drive and I'd be like, wow, this is cool, from here to here, this is like a thing, and put that in the folder, and then, oh, this is so cool to do that, and then put that in the folder, and pretty soon you have a folder of just tons of ideas. And then that record was like, I was doing a session with Mike Viola, and I was like, I actually have something, do you want to work on this song? Or like, with some people, I would just pull up all of the folders and be like, do you like this idea? Do you like this idea? Which is kind of what, producers do. Like where you're in the room with, X or Y R&B singer, and you play them beats, or you play the ideas, and they're like, oh, I like that. And then you write to it. And that was kind of what I was doing in the, like maybe more organic way where it's just like it's bass and drums, but there's a real compositional aspect to it. Like I'm playing choral stuff and you kind of get a vibe, and that's how that record came about. And that really felt good. It was like, I like making music like that. And I really like being a collaborator. Like I love being, you know, this is another way circling around too. Like I was so inspired by and kind of intimidated by like my musical brothers, like where it's like they were true, like did everything. Like Nate especially is just such a genius and such a wonderful like what? Like this, you know, you play every instrument, you write every word, you play and you mix it and you master it and you da 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 da, and it's not shit.
Yeah,
it's really good, you know. And for me, it was like it just felt good, kind of like this feels good for me. It felt good, kind of owning that process for myself, you know. And yeah, for me, it was like I finally got around to it. I could say because I was too busy, because I was too busy for years and years. But I think more honestly, it was like I was just ready to start making records and to kind of like turn that one voice off. That was just kind of like, you know, because I think everyone has that where it's just like you hear a record by, you know, you're a bass player, you're like, you know, like, you know, what's his name, with Brad Meldau.
Oh, Larry Grenadier.
Larry makes this record that's just like,
how
am I going to make a solo bass record? Like, what? That's so, what? You know, or, you know, or then you go to Jocko's first hour, the Word of Mouth album, and it's like, what, you know, as a bass, but where will I fit in? Or Eberhard Weber, but it's like, it's pretty liberating to get to this thing where it's like, no, this is, like, you just want to make music and you want to make things that feel good, and like your voice is going to come through, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Because like, I mean, all those years you did have something to say, but finally it was that artistic ego going, okay, I am going to say it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to talk about Haunted this way, that's really cool. You brought up Plastic Ono Band because, and I was listening to it and I heard so many different influences, that in particular, and then Beatles because of some of the chords and harmonies, and then, you know, jazz chords and other things. And I feel like some people are, you know, I just do this one thing and that's what it is. And they're afraid to, especially jazz musicians, I find, they're afraid to like anything other than, you know, hardcore jazz. And I find myself lucky to be interested in so many things. And I really hope that helps. I think that helps everything, you know, even if you don't hear an influence. But it was so cool when I was listening to that and I heard so many, I heard you, of course, but it was fantastic.
Oh, that means so much. I mean, it's just so nice to know that you listen to it, and I respect your artistry so much. So it's like, that means a lot. Thank you very much.
Oh,
yeah. That was a, and you know, and there's some painful songs on there, so it was a real like, you know, get it all out kind of a record. It was but yeah, it felt good to kind of like land in that zone, and like hopefully it was like all like unified enough where it's like, this feels like a collection of songs, you know, and but yeah, it's kind of neat. It feels, I'm excited now to have put those both out, and I'm starting work on another one, and it's you know, it's just one of those things. Like, it's so funny. Like when I was 18 and there was that band I was telling you about, I think I was kind of ready to put out my own records, you know, like then, where it's like, I just didn't have and there's that kind of like, there's that thing where it's like, the more knowledge you gain, the more knowledge you have of not knowing anything. And there is something to that kind of like the blinders that like that youth gives, that just that and it's crazy that like so much music that we listen to, that everyone listens to, everyone celebrates, is made by 20-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you listen to the Beatles, it's like these guys are in their 20s.
Yeah.
Like they're in their early 20s. Like we still listen to it and it's still glorious.
Yeah. I know. I can't stop listening to the remastered Sgt. Pepper's or the Abbey Road. That, yeah. I'm just hearing things I've never heard before. Okay, I have 2 more tiny questions for you, Kaveh,
Yeah.
then I'll let you go.
What do you got?
Okay, because you fall into this category, and I think a lot of bass players do. I'm just curious what your take is on it. Why do you think bass players make such great MDs? Or like, why do you think there's so many bass players that are MDs, musical directors? Because you are one.
Well, I have been one, and I should clarify that I'm not John Legend's MD.
Okay.
But I did MD for Sia for a bit of time, and Adam Blackstone is a great big MD right now. There's a lot of bass players. I mean, I think bass players are real bridge builders, you know, in situations, you know. So they're used to kind of forging a relationship with the artist too, that is like, you know, feasibly an artist can just play a concert or a set with a bass player. Mm-hmm. Like there's something, or, you know, I don't know, like there is a thing with that. I'm not sure. And I think bass players tend to work a lot, so they know a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's like their Rolodex might be a little deeper than somebody else. So it's like they'll, you know, that is a part of being an MD, is just like, okay, if that person's not going to work out, like got this other person available. But yeah, I don't know. That would be my quick take on that.
Yeah, I think that, and also like bass players were always in the back, like surveying everything. Like you're saying, it's like building these relationships, but you also see everything from a different point of view almost.
Right. Yeah. You are surveying like from above.
You're surveying quite from a different height.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, a little too far off the ground, but yes. Yeah, you are kind of it's so funny. Yeah, you're like, sometimes like, yeah, bass does have that perspective. But I mean, I guess you could argue though that like all the instruments have their unique kind of vantage points that are like, and pretty crucial, you know, like you could say that, I kind of say that about drummers, like every band is as good as its drummer, you know, and, or the drummer is like really determined, like just so determined the sound of the band. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Bass players do make good MDs. They definitely can. Yeah.
I'll get to the bottom of it through this series. Okay, and then my last question. Even now, I know you're extremely busy, but like pre-COVID or quarantine, whatever, what was a typical day for you like?
Pre-COVID, it was very different. It was really pretty intense, pretty busy. There was, I was playing with John Legend, and he had a tour set up throughout the summer that was starting rehearsals in June, and but I had signed on to work with Sting in this production of his play, The Last Ship, and that was an incredible experience. We started in January, and went to a few different theaters, and he was a part of the cast, and he was there 100% of the time. And he's such an excellent bassist, so he would come and hang out, sit next to me every night, and man, we would talk shit, we would joke, and he's just such a wonderful person. And the musicians in that group were so great. And that was all double bass and a lot of playing. And so I was doing that, and that was a really full schedule. And I was also, doing some records too, like where it was like I would do, and then I'm a father, so I would be taking my girls to school and, you know, doing, and then going sometimes to the studio and working till around 3, and then running straight to the theater, or sometimes picking up my daughters and then driving somewhere else and driving to a dance class, and then just driving straight to the theater and playing, and then a lot of late nights, really early mornings. And we were in San Francisco when all of this thing, you know, all of the stuff like, you know, blew up in March. And so that life was crazy. It was like I was staying in a house in Bernal Heights, and I was walking to the theater every day, and then I was flying back to LA every week, spending 2 days and like fitting in sessions while I was home, but then also, you know, time with my daughters for those 2.5 days every week. And it was crazy. Yeah, it was a really intense grind there for a second. But yeah, like, you know, it's never quotidian. It's like, you know, it's just all over the place. It's like a really crazy hustle. You're running all over the place. I used to be in tons of bands. I used to be like the guy in like all of these bands, and that was just, I loved it. I just got off on that energy and that kind of a thing. But, you know, the more real, you know, like, you know, when I started building a family and then also like certain things became more of a priority, or certain things became more developed, you know, it's like you kind of start cutting certain things out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my life right pre-COVID. And then when it all stopped, it was like, you know, like everyone, it's like, then you just see the dust kind of going like this, and the world stops. And but my life has been, lately it's been, I just finished producing a record and turned it in this week for an artist. And that was really fun to work on. And in 2 months, we wrote and recorded all the music, and I played most of the instruments, and it's getting mixed right now. And then I've just been playing on songs and playing on productions with different artists from my own studio, and you know, just that kind of a thing. Like nothing near the volume that it used to be, but there are glimmers of hope there, where it's like, you know, certain calls are coming in, and it's like, okay, there's a possibility of this kind of opening up. It's a really interesting time, you know?
Yeah, and I only see from the peripheral and talking to you a little bit, but you seem like you're able to have a nice balance between, you know, work and music and your family.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that having everything halt does so much for, I was talking to my friend Jessica Hoop about this, but I was, you know, yeah, this in some ways is doing wonders for relationships. Like my relationship with my daughters, it's like, I'll treasure this time.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, the relationship with my partner, my girlfriend, it's like, just this kind of time together is, you know, the music life is really hard on relationships, and can be really tough, you know? So, it's a double-edged sword. It's been like devastating and also like really healing, you know, and really like a real kind of fortifying time too, you know? Yeah.
And hopefully when, you know, things start coming back, it's like we can take a piece of what we're having right now and take it with us, you know, when we're on the road or in the studio.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I think that, like, yeah, just learning habits are all about like just changing like pathways of your brain, you know, and just like, so getting a good chunk of time like this one that we're living through right now, of a certain type of living is beneficial, you know. Hopefully it is for a lot of people, because I know a lot of people can be suffering, and like people with rough situations or for whatever, but on the whole, like I have nothing to complain about.
Yeah.
Like it's been good. You know, it's been good in a general sense.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Well, Kaveh, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the Hump today. It was so great to talk to you in person. This was awesome. Well, and hopefully we get to talk in person. We're physically distanced right now. We're not socially distanced, but